Neato. Everybody can hear me all right? Now I get to talk to everybody like you are random anonymous people with your internet handles. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, right? That's the thing. 21 people, not bad. Okay. You don't get your own hashtag. Alright, so we can get going here in a few minutes. So, yeah, the whole point, 1 year's got to be off, otherwise I can't do it. So yeah, the way this is going to work for you all is, hey Mason, we are going to give this a shot. So I did this morning for my graphics class, and it worked wonderfully. If anybody has any suggestions or any comments, any way we can make this better or more streamlined for you, please let me know. Otherwise, we're gonna give this a shot for a little bit. So you can get a hold of me. Is that good or bad? Interesting. Let me see what I can do here. Oh, that's good. At least one person's got an okay thing. Go ahead and try something really quickly. I'm gonna pop over to the Twitch stream and see how it sounds to me. Oh, that's good. Everybody else is okay. Yeah, I'm guessing it's a connection problem on your end. So I will say this, if you are having technical issues, this will be going up on YouTube afterwards. So as soon as everything's done and uploaded and encoded, I'll put the stream link on the Moodle page. It's going to be on Twitch, I think, for 2 weeks before it gets taken down automatically. That's just how Twitch works. I am not a massive streamer, so it's not going to stay up there for months. I think max you get is 14 days as a starter. So yeah, basically, I'm going to do the lecture as normal. My intention is that the class works kind of as normal. All dates, everything's going to be the same, and class labs are going to be the same. So if you are all working on an in-class assignment, a couple things. So I will go off stream and we'll go into the Discord channel. So you can feel free to type, you can use your voice, whatever you're comfortable with. But when you guys are doing like in-class work, I'll stop the stream because otherwise it's going to be me sitting here staring at you for however long it takes. So we will do that. If it becomes apparent that something is not working, obviously we'll change things up. But hopefully this works out okay. So if you want to get my attention during class, so I'm going to be lecturing as normal. I'm going to treat this like you're all in front of me instead of a window with the outside world looking so lovely out there. If you have a question, you can send a message on Twitch, which will pop up on my screen over here. You can also raise your hand with the redeem raise hand command. So I've got this in a couple places. So tails will pop up, hopefully. Tails will pop up. There we go. Not sure what the delay was there. Then I should see it pop up and it will get my attention, and hopefully, I can answer your question then. So, move some things around a little bit so I can see better. Okay. There's a little bit of delay. I also removed the soundboard that I mentioned because I figured, with some suggestions from some of you who are more Twitch savvy, If we get random people dropping by, I don't want the soundboard playing hello there every 5 seconds, even though you can set a delay. So there's the channel. You can raise your hand, at which point I'll pay more attention to the chat. Or you can go, let me get out of the starting soon here. All right. So you can also go into the Discord, type a message out in here. You can also go in the voice channel. Now, Shriyash, nice job. If you're going to be in the voice, feel free to talk. It's fine. Make sure push to talk is enabled so that we don't hear you coughing, grumbling, etc., etc. Only thing too is that if you're on the voice channel, it will be recorded and put up on YouTube. So if that's something you're uncomfortable with, just keep that in mind. I will do my best to pay attention to the chat. I'll kind of look over here up in space every now and again. So we will have that. So you have the Discord, you have Twitch, you have numerous ways to get a hold of me. Other than that, that's pretty much kind of the high level stuff. So the other thing too, with all this funness, are going to be your presentations. So that's going to be one of the only sticking points in a way. So what I'm going to ask you all to do, I think assuming you read the email that went out, going to try to have you deliver your content digitally in some manner. Obviously, I don't want you all getting together and breaking the quarantine recommendation, but I'll probably have like one person be in charge of the presentation / demo. If other people want to contribute, you guys can figure out a way to, share at the same time. But basically, I'm going to remove the requirement that everybody has to talk during the demo. And initially, my thought was that we could just, have everybody upload YouTube videos, and we would watch it during your time slot. Or you could go live with Discord, or you could go live with whatever technology you're comfortable with. I mean, if you're already a Twitch streamer, I kind of lurked in some of your Twitch streams the other day when I was trying to figure this out, the elderly professor trying to understand technology, even though I qualify as a millennial. Basically, however you want to do it, but I still am going to be looking for presentations from you all with that. So if anybody has any suggestions for what they would prefer or how they want to handle things, I'm definitely going to be open to suggestions. So with all that, I think I've covered everything. So asking questions in class will run basically the same. Final projects are still going to be final projects. Any other questions that anybody has that maybe I haven't talked about? While I hydrate. I am also not a Twitch streamer. I'm not going to do too much hyping. Spooky, scary skeletons and shivers down your spine. Other than that, I had to get that one out. But yeah, so other thing too is, again, this will go up on YouTube, so I'm hoping that the automated transcription service will be fairly decent. Some of the demos that I tried worked out okay. Yeah, other than that, plan for today is we're going to talk about failover clustering. Aw, I'm sorry, your poor Pitbull. I'm also intentionally kind of leaving the chat stream off of the main screen. Jabari, can you please do push to talk? I don't mind if you're in the voice channel, just turn on push to talk, otherwise it's going to sound kind of like that. Not to pick on you, it's fine, no worries. But yeah, so I'm also echoing my desktop speakers while my computer sound to the channel, so that if anybody wants to talk, they'll be able to hear that. I can force push. Can I? Well, let's do that really quickly. I thought that was personal. All right. I don't want to mute anybody. voice activity to X. Wasn't that going to, oh, yeah, it says it right there. Thank you. You are all the best. All right, well, hopefully that works out. I'm coming from the WebEx world where everything is people have to manage their own permissions, which is kind of why I didn't want to use WebEx. I'm not a huge fan of it. So that's good. Okie dokie. So, other than that, you joined late. We started with perfect classes, and yeah. So I'm kind of curious while I'm pulling everything up here. What are your other classes using for technologies? I assume WebEx or Panopto is going to be one of them. WebEx, okay. That's the school recommended one. PHOF, so is that Panopto? Oh, somebody's using Slack, nice. Come on. WebEx, and it's a mess. Yeah, I've heard, so actually I'm pretty sure that I heard the school was dropping WebEx next year, possibly. It's got a lot of issues. You were up. This guy, so I actually did a little bit of a demo earlier. So I just want to get my art, come on. Google Cloud has been very finicky for me today. WebEx struggle and Google Meetings. Google Meetings is supposed to be pretty decent. I know they just opened it up for education, which is pretty great. But talking with one of the Google Cloud people, it sounded like recording. It was kind of wonky. One of the students in my morning class suggested Mixer. Any of you ever used that? I mean, I like Twitch so far, but I'm open to things. All right, so we have this guy up and running. I am intentionally not going on the school VPN. Please don't use Mixer. Okay, fair enough. I noticed that actually one of you mentioned to me earlier they're trying to get on the VPN and there was no available licenses available. Last I checked with CTO, the school limit for VPN licenses was 50 and it was maxed out earlier today. So, yeah, I'm going to try to use Google Cloud for at least the presentations so that I don't take up a slot needlessly. Alrighty though. Place here. Full screen, please. Thank you. I was actually surprised at how nice Twitch was. So I've got my old got an integrated graphics card and a dedicated NVIDIA chip. It actually doesn't do too bad. If you guys do end up doing this, I don't know if you've ever used Streamlabs or anything like that before. It's kind of a nice tool. At least for me on Windows, you have to make it to use the integrated chip if you've got this dual setup. Otherwise, just get a nice big black screen here. Anyway, so let's get going here. So the plan for today, should not take the whole class, is my guess. So I've got a little bit of an assignment for you at the end. And the way that we're going to handle the in-class assignments is that I'm going to probably give you a little bit of extra time, honestly, for it, so that, you know, if you don't go to the stream, taskbar, go away, please. All right. Basically, you just have an extra day or two for the in-class assignments, depending on how hard they are. All right, so clustering. This is something which you can implement on your term projects if you want to do that. And I actually ran through the Google demo earlier today and last night. And you can actually set it up pretty easily in the Google Cloud area. It's going to be slightly wonky if you try it in the school VM setup, but at least on the Google side, it's actually fairly good. So for failover, you know, this is a very useful topic, right? So if you're running a service and You know, it's not just you and your family or whatever, or your friends. You're running something that thousands of users care about. You're going to care about if the server is performance, so basically it's not super slow. You want it to be running adequately for all users, and you want it to be up as long as possible. I forgot to, again, I forgot to make my mouse a little bit more visible. But performance and uptime, these two are two of our considerations. 100% uptime, horribly infeasible, right? But 99% is usually what we shoot for. So we want our servers to be up. We want them to be scalable, you know, any of these things in the word cloud there, adaptable, compatible, credible. So all of these OLTs, basically, you want your server to handle. Failover is going to get us this. All right, so I've got a couple of examples here, and we'll see how this goes. Might have to Dropbox delay. So, gotta get my Futurama memes in here somehow. But, you know, technology will go down. This other one is Bender playing around with outdated robots. I will leave that one to you to watch on your own. Maybe on your second monitor while I'm droning on and on and on and on about failover. But failover is going to help us with those things that we don't plan for. It's less than 10 seconds, so it should be good. But, I mean, I'm not monetizing this, so I shouldn't be too worried about copyright strikes, I don't think, right? I guess the video would become unavailable. Worst case, I have to edit it out. Okay, so failover clustering is something that you can do to make your servers more fault tolerant for both performance and uptime. Okay, subscribe with Twitch Prime. No donations, no bits, please. I don't want to get any concern about money here as well. But so with failover clustering, this is something you do in Windows and Linux. Windows, it's a lot more seamless. Because what we're going to do is we're going to add the cluster feature to our servers, and we're going to link them together that way. We can do this in Linux too. So there's going to be technologies like a heartbeat service, which is going to say, is the server up or is it down? Basically, can we talk to it or not? So we're just going to call this failover. It's a group of servers that work together. Basically, you're going to have one cluster that is the head server, which is going to be in charge of routing traffic if necessary. So if this one is too busy, I might offload some of the effort to another server. Right? So basically, this is going to ideally make your life easier. We're going to avoid downtime, hopefully increase our performance. Downsides, though, this is a little bit more complicated. Right? You're not just running one server. You're running multiple servers that all have to be linked together on the same subnet or somehow through the same network. Obviously, we're going to use Active Directory in case of Windows, but it's just more to deal with, right? It's more things that you have to handle. Cost could be considered an issue too because you're going to have more servers, more licenses, maybe more employees that have to manage these things. So there are some downsides, obviously, but the upsides tend to be, better, right? Performance and uptime, we want that. So, what do we need for failover to work? So obviously we need at least two servers, because if one server goes down, the other one is going to take over. You need a minimum two, right? Other thing we need, we're going to need some kind of a shared storage. iSush, that's a great name. Makes me want sushi. Probably means something else. So we're going to need at least two network links between the two servers. So one of them is going to be a shared bus of some kind. Might not necessarily be Ethernet. We could just have direct connections to storage. And then we're also going to have a network between our two nodes for connecting traffic to them. So this is effectively what we need here. And then obviously we need clients who are going to access these services. But at its core, we have this little pattern here. Now this cluster storage is interesting because it doesn't necessarily have to be a hard disk. It could be a shared folder. I haven't tried this on the school network, so I'm not sure if it works now, but it is possible to set up a shared folder as kind of the link between 2 or more servers. So if anybody wants to go and try that out, they're more than welcome to. But these are kind of the components that we need here. All right, so again, this is the sticking point on the school network if you're going for persistent hard disk. Okay, so some terms for you. We have a cluster. That's our first term. This is just a group of servers that are providing this failover service. We're defining a cluster. Right, you probably have heard of cluster in other domains as well, right? Like cluster computing, for instance. The node is going to be your cluster server. So here you have node 1 and node 2. I could have n nodes. Those are just going to be servers hosting whatever service and participating in the cluster. All right. And then here's a new term. So that we also have to have a quorum. Now, anybody paying attention still, and not just going down the deep end of watching Futurama highlights? Oh, that's going to be helpful there. Hit escape and pull the answer up early. Anybody want to take a guess at what a quorum is? We'll play real life Dora the Explorer. Yeah, let's hit the arrow several times, bring the answer right up. So, we want a consensus that our cluster can actually provide the service. The opposite of quorum. So, basically how this stream is going so far. Yeah. Exactly. I need to, I probably don't need to put sound effects in here. That'd just make this horrible for you guys. So the quorum is that our cluster members will be able to provide the service. And what this means is that we have to have enough devices, enough capability for whatever service that we are putting under this failover umbrella to actually function correctly. So the quorum is basically your servers, your disk drives, everything that's participating that they can provide the service. So they're actually going to take a vote. So the server nodes will vote if they can do this or not. And the way this is going to work is that nodes will have a vote by default. And depending on how you configure it, either a file share or a hard drive or a shared disk or something like that will have a vote, and they will participate in the scheme. If we have enough votes, cluster is going to be online. If we don't have enough votes, cluster goes down and can't provide the service. So usually it's fairly critical that we have enough capabilities to provide whatever we want to do. And I keep saying like service is a nebulous term. It can be whatever you want to host on these servers, right? So whatever service, whether it's like a file share or a Minecraft server or stream hosts, anything like that can be put under failover, as long as the servers can handle that. So a couple more terms. So failover is basically going to be when we have some instance of our service being moved to a different node. So basically what we're going to see, and actually I'll do a quick little demo here in a moment. Actually for this, I need to get my other nodes up and running, so bear with me a sec while I start these guys up. I've got 3 Windows nodes running, and I'm trying to not drain my account with them being on. So basically what these things are doing is that they are going to provide the service, and then if a node goes down, you're going to fail over to a different node. Right, so if I've got 5 servers, they're all under this cluster, my head server goes down, the next failover, or the service will fail over somewhere else. Now, this will happen either automatically because the node's gone down. Maybe we have a resource failure, so a hard disk died, network went down for that particular server, something happened. Or you can even decide as an administrator to change that. So you have multiple options for how to fail over. Maybe you want to pull a server down, swap its hard drive, and put it back up or something like that. Failback then is that once whatever has happened is resolved, the original node will take back over. So ideally, your head server is going to be the one kind of in charge. It's going to be basically the main one. It's going to take over once the issue is taken care of. All right, so to give you an example here, let me pull this up now. worked. Cool. So good question. So fail means that something happens. It doesn't necessarily matter what that something is. So the server could go down, the service could fail on that server in some way. Basically, something happened with your forward-facing server, and another one will take over. Does that make sense? So basically, if the whole service has a configuration problem, it will go down anyway for everybody. However, if it's just like a transient error with one server, it can go to fail over to another one. So hopefully that makes sense. All right, so these guys are now up. So I have two cluster members, so this WSFC1 and 2. And then I've got a domain controller as well. These are all on their own little network. Yeah, it definitely depends how you configure it. So, we're going to look at a very, very basic configuration. But I mean, if it's a error with the service itself, then you're going to have more problems than just, the failover not being able to handle it. Like if you're running a Minecraft service and you misconfigure the world properties, that's going to apply to any server it's on, not just the cluster that we're defining. All right, so we've got our 3 servers up. Hopefully everything is good here. If you haven't used the GCP Windows instances too much yet, sometimes it helps to give them a few minutes to load as well. So hopefully everything's good here. So I installed a failover cluster on these 3 servers. So I actually have this link at the end of the slides if you want to do load balancing or failover. I didn't go all the way to load balancing. Now I'll leave that if that's something that you want to handle, but I have this failover engine here. So what we want to do is I want to run failover. I want to run it as my cluster admin, just because I'll probably be doing things with it later. So admin, I type that in right. All right, we're in. So this is the failover cluster manager in Windows. It looks like we have stuff that is offline. So we do have an error here. Critical error, what's that? A whole bunch of errors because everything was probably down. File share exists, so it should be good. So what we want is this command. So I just basically want to test to make sure that my cluster is working. That's not what I wanted to do. I want to run this as my cluster admin, because this user has much more privileges than anybody else. See if this works or not, or if I've borked this demo by taking everything down. Good. So probably a little bit nebulous right now. Basically what I've done is that my current host server is the secondary Windows server, so WSFC-2. We look at my compute engine, I've got 1, 2, and domain controller here. Originally the cluster host was 1, I've moved it over to 2. So now, if this server was running something, again, some service, the host that would provide that service is server 2. Right? So what's going to happen, so I now have, intentionally as an admin, I have moved the head node to be the secondary server. What I can do is a nice little demo here, is I can take the second one down, so I'm going to stop it. I'm going to stop it. Thank you. Stop. We're going to go down. And now, when I go back over here, so this is on my first server, you actually see that it changed back over to 1. So it did that after I stopped the machine. So basically that machine has kind of a heartbeat service where once it goes offline, the cluster manager is going to recognize that swap resources back over. Right, so my service would transparently still be running to my users. There's more to this one. We'll come back to that a little bit later, but basically, this is the concept of failover. Honestly, fairly straightforward with Windows. It's more straightforward than I thought it would be. Right, so, failover and failback. Alright, so what do we need for this? So we're going to need some networks for this service. So ideally, you're going to have multiple NICs as well. So redundancy, performance, basically everything that we've talked about in the past, why we would need more than one network card, right? So we're going to have a multi-homed host. Now we're going to have this figure down here. This is pretty similar to what we saw before. We're going to have a network link from the server so that we can actually perform the failover through the Active Directory infrastructure, and then a separate connection to the storage. So we might have a public network connection for any clients coming in. We're going to have a private network for node-to-node communication, and then something that's kind of in between for external storage communication. But ideally, you're going to have more than one NIC for this. All right, so the storage, we also are going to need it to have, we need the storage to be available to all servers. If you guys remember from when we were talking about the virtualization and we were migrating host to host kind of seamlessly, we need a way for node 1 to say, understand where data is being stored. So move the pointers. Node 1 is now the host instead of node 2. We still have access to the shared storage through this network down here. Key is that you're looking for consistency, right? So as long as everybody knows what's going on, it should be a fairly seamless transition from node 1 to node 2 or node n, whichever one's taking over. Ideally, these servers are all going to be the same version of Windows Server, so we're all at 2019 or 2016 or whatever license you have. They should also be at the same update level too. So you don't necessarily want servers to be out of sync with each other in terms of which of the latest updates have been applied that will, delete all your documents or whatever the exciting thing is that Microsoft has done lately. Instead, you're a sip of coffee. So, ideally all the servers are going to be the same here. So for hardware, and again, please stop me if you want me to talk through something a little bit more, or you just want me to get through this so that you can go back to relaxing at home in isolation. So ideally, hardware-wise, and obviously this little sticker here is now out of date by several years. If your server is certified for a Windows Server, then you know that the hardware is ideal for that version of Windows Server. Multiple networks again, so hardware network is a hardware consideration. Yay, emotes. I love them. So we should also have our network adapters be configured the same. So if you've ever looked at a network configuration for the cards, you can actually configure them at a very low level. I probably deserve this. To basically provide, maybe I'm using IP4 versus IP6 versus. I need to stop looking at chat. At least I don't have it streaming across the screen yet. That'd be even more distracting. I feel like you're doing this intentionally now. All right, so we need our network adapters. We also need our shared storage. So again, fairly self-explanatory here. Multiple networks, shared storage. Ooh, Isaac, love it. In terms of the infrastructure, everybody has to use DNS resolution. So basically, we need to be able to access all of our other servers. And if we're in Active Directory, this is going to come naturally, right? So I can resolve this WSFC-1 versus 2 versus 3. We need DNS. Don't necessarily need DHCP because as long as you have assigned IP addresses, everything's going to be good, right? Everybody needs a unique IP address. You're also going to need to have a user account, which is going to be your cluster creator. So this account has to have admin rights on all servers under failover. So what you might have noticed, I just kind of zipped through it, but when I was over here in my server, what I did was I right-clicked, more, run as a different user. I created a cluster admin account. This is a Active Directory account where this user has admin privileges on every single server, including the domain controller. So basically, I am learning. That's the best I can ask for. But this account is kind of like that account that you all joined my Active Directory network with before. This one has cluster rights, basically. All right, so Active Directory, we have an admin, and then you want to limit this role to only the servers that are going to be handling this failover. This does not get put on the domain controller. So it is in all caps, which means don't do it. I'm actually pretty sure you're going to get an error saying you can't do it anyway, but you don't want to have your domain controller be part of a failover cluster. Your domain controller is busy doing other things, for one. Okay, so we have our hardware, we have our infrastructure. Software is just going to be whatever service you have, plus your server configuration. It's actually, so the question is that the cluster admin just needs to be a local administrator. You can enforce that through group policy. The cluster manager is not a domain admin. You don't want necessarily to give domain level rights. Local admin rights will be sufficient for clusters. And if you go through the tutorial or the kind of the step-by-step guide on the page that I've linked later on, you'll actually see that. But yeah, you can enforce that through group policy. What I did was I just set it manually on all the servers I'm putting it under. If any of you went through and set like the local administrator password, it's in that same area. Okay, so the other thing that we need is a quorum. So if you remember, the quorum is going to be who is in charge, or not who's in charge. Do we have enough resources to actually provide the service that we want? So there are a couple different configurations that you can have, and based on which quorum we're going for, it depends on who has the right to vote in this setup. So first one is a node majority. So basically, only the nodes will have a vote, which means your servers will only have a vote. So if I have 3 servers and 2 of them are online, then the quorum is satisfied. We have a quorum. If any of you have ever been in a committee meeting, the idea of a quorum is similar. Basically, you have to have a certain number of members voting, but you only have nodes voting. And when you have this kind of a setup, you have to have an odd number of nodes. Right? Because if you have 2 nodes and one of them's offline, you don't have greater than half of the nodes online, quorum dies. You can also configure it to be a node disk majority. So your cluster nodes will vote, and then you have a disk witness. So this disk is going to be your shared hard drive, basically, or some disk that you have configured to be a witness in this setup. So basically, this is an extra option that you can toggle. And here it's not just half the votes, it's half the votes. So it's going to be nodes plus whatever disks you have. So in this case, you could have something like a 2-cluster node with a disk witness, and then you'd have 3 voting members. Other one, node file share majority. So this is what I have up and running on the Google Cloud platform right now. You have your nodes plus a file share witness. So basically, I've created a folder that is shared among all nodes, and that share is going to be a witness as well. So it will have its own vote. And then in the last case, we have no majority for the nodes, just disks. So whatever disks are being shared, if it is online, the quorum is satisfied. So we have basically 4 modes that we can configure here. This is something you configure when you set up the manager. All right, so getting questions, so I assume the stream's going well. Honestly, if this works out, I might even consider just buying a microphone and doing this in the future, because I kind of like having the recording for posterity. All right, so other thing that we have here too is a cluster shared volume. So this is not the comma separated value. CSV here is a little bit different. Basically, this is going to be our shared storage, where it's going to be a disk that has been set as a shared volume between our nodes. So if we're going to have a disk witness or some kind of shared file store, you can format it as a shared volume. So this also could be considered having multiple disks categorized under a shared volume as well. All right, so what else do we have here? So this is pretty much everything that I've already talked about. So kind of one of the last things that we're going to talk about, at least at a high level for clustering, your application settings that you can set for your service. You can actually create an ordering of which nodes you want to take on. So like if I have a really beefy server, that's going to be my main host. If that one goes down, I might have a preference for the second one. Otherwise, it will just be randomly assigned or set, in a preconceived order. And then you also have to set what is going to be failed over. So if you continue in the tutorial, again, that I've linked, it would be a load balancing server. So you're going to set up a web server. And then if this one goes down, the website will be pushed over to another machine. Or some kind of an application, service, whatever it is you're sharing. All right, so what I've configured in my demo here is simply this is the host, or no, this is the host, no, this is the host. But you can go much, much deeper. Troubleshooting for these things, there are logs. So there is going to be a general cluster log, which I actually showed earlier, because I didn't realize I had a whole slew of errors. But if we look at this, there's this events log here where, oops, here's a whole bunch of problems that have been happening. So here, for instance, we have this node failed to join the cluster because it couldn't communicate. Why is that? Well, it was powered off. Somebody tripped the power. Or my file share witness is down. So as I mentioned in this particular setup, I've configured a file share, which is just a shared folder on my domain controller that everybody can access. This is one of my voting nodes. It is inaccessible, so we don't have a quorum. This makes it a critical error for us, because we need this voting member for the service. So there's a ton of different logs that you can look through. There is also the validator, which is a wizard, a Windows-based wizard here. So there's this validate cluster. I'm just going to view the validation report because it takes a while to run through. That basically you have a whole list of tests that can be run. Are shared drives accessible? Does your role have the proper permissions? Think of it, it's almost like one of those unit testing tools where you can pick all of the different things that you want to test for your application. This thing is very, very detailed. And honestly, I'm not going to try to avoid keep talking through the guide or whatnot, but I don't have a report. Okay, it's no longer available. Maybe we'll run through it. Basically, there are some things you have to disable because we don't have real hardware. So if we validate this cluster, so this is the Windows wizard I was talking about. Basically, it's going to go through the config, anything with Hyper-V, network and storage, etc., etc. So now it's already taking longer than usual. Cool. Hopefully it's still going. According to my tool, it's still live, so hopefully it's just your end. All right, there we go. Okay, so here's the test wizard. So you can run all tests. It's going to be set as recommended, but I would recommend only running these tests. So the issue is that this storage has to be deselected. Again, we don't have a real hard drive to connect to. If you run the test with this selected, it will fail, basically. But these other ones are basically going to look through, can I run through all of these tasks, right? So can I look at the BIOS information of all of my servers under cluster? Make sure everybody's service pack and update levels are at the correct version. Operating system version, all of these are actually tests which will be run. So I'm going to actually run this just to see what happens. But basically I have, effectively a test runner here, which is kind of handy, honestly. All right. So if we want to install this, I'm not going to actually run through the install. I will show you where you can find it. I will say that this probably took me probably a couple hours to actually create the cluster from my end, just because I was going back and forth with Google Cloud, waiting for things to install and then reboot and then install and then configure. So it does take a little bit of time. And if I'm going to do this live, it's probably going to break anyway, just based on how things go. All right, so it's still going, but basically we see that all of these tests are either not applicable or passed. So yeah, so no WSFC2 is down. So that's probably a good warning to know about. But a handy tool. So let's get out of PowerShell and let's go to our cluster. So this is a standard Windows server. Nothing crazy here. Lots of errors here at the bottom, obviously, because I've been putting servers up and down and around and all kinds of things. Questions so far? I'm kind of zipping through the material, but clustering is actually pretty straightforward, I think, from a Windows perspective. If anybody has any questions, feel free to chime in. So if you want to add clustering to your server, I am told that poggers is a good thing, so I'll take that as a compliment. So it actually happens. So the question is, how fast would it happen? It's fairly seamless, honestly. So if you are going to take a server down, so if you noticed before when I turned the machine off, the failover happened before I could even alt-tab back to the server itself. So unless if there's any kind of handshake with your service itself, it's usually pretty seamless. It kind of goes back to the idea of uptime being a preference here in performance. This is actually pretty good. So I clicked Add Role. So I went to the Manage Add Roles and Features. And I'm going to do role-based. Pick the server. I could be doing this from my domain controller too, assuming that I'm managing these servers. So this is not a role, it's actually a feature. So you click Next without clicking anything under roles. And then you actually see it here, Failover Clustering. So this will just run through install as normal, nothing too crazy. But once you get to the actual installation, you have to run it as your cluster admin. So again, one of the prerequisites here is that you have a administrator account that can manage all these servers. All right, so what I was basically doing, and actually I can show you this very quickly too. If you click local server, then you can get into your, what's that? I did this earlier, where is it now? Oh, sorry, it's tools. Computer management. So this is basically your administration tool if you search for it. So computer management, local users and groups. So there is, I clicked groups, so here's my administrators. I basically added this cluster admin domain account to be an administrator, and that's all that I really needed for administration and installation here. And if you are, as a side note, if you're getting an error with setting up Active Directory, your administrator account needs to have a password set to the appropriate Windows level. So if you go into this computer management, local users and groups, users, set your local admin account and enable it. So right now this admin account is disabled. I want to enable it. No, I didn't change the password. Fine. So this is using that change me immediately password. But basically, if you want to promote your machine to be a domain controller, it will throw an error at this point. When am I getting affiliated? I'm teaching you content that you paid the school for. I doubt I'm going to go for affiliation. I'm going to guess there are some legality issues there too. Also, I'm not cool enough. Sorry. Wait, I can be cool. Hold on. Let's become cool. No, we don't want that to happen. Elderly man tries to become cool. Fails miserably. All right, so that's how you would set the admin account, basically. You guys are cute. Get my Spelunky stream going again. Everybody loves Spelunky, right? All right, so let's assume that we've installed it. You would start by validating the configuration. So that was that wizard that I ran to actually pass all tests. After that, you would add whichever nodes you want to be a part of the cluster. So for my 2-node cluster, I would have cluster node 1 and node 2. They get added in as long as I can communicate with them all. Cluster will be automatically installed. Oh, you're right. One doesn't become cool. I already am cool. So with clustering, you can also do it at multiple sites too. So if you remember back from Active Directory when we were talking about, sites versus domains versus all that fun stuff, you can also cluster between sites. So here we've got 3 sites in Australia. We've got Canberra, Melbourne, Sydney. We have 4 different nodes, 2 of them at Melbourne, 2 at Sydney, and then you have a file share at Canberra. It is absolutely possible to do failover clustering between them. Out of curiosity, see if you're all paying attention to the stream rather than just slinging emotes at me. Why would I want to do something like this? Why would I have nodes at multiple sites? See if we can use this for actual learning rather than memeing. There's a fire. That's a good example for Australia right now. Are they still in flames, or is that all done? So yeah, absolutely in terms of emergencies, right? So if something goes down, that is definitely one thing. You can also configure this to be local too. Good, glad it's all done. Watching the news is just frustrating these days. But let's say that I have a user here at Melbourne, right? I can configure local users to access the servers that are closer to them. So if I am here and I try to access my service, it's going to be a lot faster if I access my local nodes, right? Yes, the coronavirus. So I mean the coronavirus for servers, I just spill my Corona beer on top of it, right? And it fizzles and goes up in flames. But speed's going to be one thing. Local users can access their local nodes. So Sydney's not going to be accessing Melbourne, for instance. They're going to access their local servers. And if something goes down, then they would go elsewhere. So we can do that as well. In terms of replication, now between sites, we have a couple of different ways of making sure that all of our cluster nodes are up to date with each other. Again, if one node changes, you want those to reflect to all of your other servers. You have a couple different ways that you can set it to run. Now again, this is mirroring your storage basically. It can be synchronous or asynchronous. So asynchronous means that once my primary storage has been written, a write complete is issued. So one server will be written, or sorry, one storage will be written, and then everybody else will be. Whereas synchronous, everybody will write kind of in tandem here. So one is faster, one is more fault tolerant. It's all going to be replicated in the end. It's just how quickly do you want it to happen? Right? What's more important to you? That's kind of one of these trade-offs that we've been talking about. And it's not going to. There's not going to be a right answer. It's going to be what you particularly want for your setup. So yeah, asynchronous secondary is written later. All of this was Windows. Okay. We have a few wizards to run through, a couple of admin accounts to set up, or an admin account to set up between various machines. But again, pretty straightforward. We can do this async. Yeah, sure. Sorry. So synchronous basically means that I might have said this out of order if that was confusing. So if I have multiple storage locations, as long as both of them are written, a write complete will be issued. So once everybody is up to date, then we can say the replication is complete. Right, so everybody is in synchronous. Asynchronous means that if I have an update made to a server, its storage is written, and then I don't necessarily care if everybody else is replicated. I'm just going to say, I'm done. Everybody else can handle their own thing separately. All right, so if I've got a database over here, a database over here, not watching my stream at all. There's a great meme or emote. I want one to finish first, and then the others will go after. Synchronous means everybody's done, and then we say everything's good. Does that make sense? Or did I explain that one poorly again? Yeah, it's my T-Rex arms. Yeah, so sync would definitely be more fault tolerant. It wouldn't necessarily be written at the same time, but we're not going to say that it's done until everybody's written. If that makes sense. So I would have a database or something get updated. I would issue that update to everybody, and once everybody has consumed those changes, then we would say the write's done. It might not be at the exact same time. It's like if we go back here, and let's say that each of these servers, it has a database or something, some kind of a file that needs to be written. If I make a change at node 1, it's going to be reflected to node 2, node 3, and node 4, and then once everybody is done writing that, we will say the write's complete. Whereas with asynchronous, node 1 would finish its write and then issue it to the other nodes. So write complete is basically meaning that the job is done, everybody has it. Awesome. Okay, so if we move on to the Linux side of things, you don't necessarily need Windows to have fault tolerance. I mean, honestly, a lot of the servers in production are Linux, as we all know. You can have the same kind of a tool here. So we don't have a verified for Ubuntu sticker. Doesn't exist as far as I'm aware. But you still need at minimum 2 servers. All right, so you need something to fail over with. Now, I will say with the Linux world, it's not going to be a very simple turnkey solution. You have to configure some services. You have a lot more manual effort. As we're all aware, you have configuration files, firewall settings to apply. This is all more manual. But what you can do, and there are going to be multiple ways to do this. Obviously, it's the open source world. But you're going to need a heartbeat service and some way of synchronizing your data. Okay, so one way is with this DRBD service, where it's going to synchronize specific service data, and a heartbeat service, which is going to say, again, is my server online or offline? The simplest way to think about a heartbeat is that I am pinging my web server, and I'm getting a response back. It is online because it is responding. Heartbeat basically does something similar to that. So here I've got a link. I don't have a demo, but if you want to try it out, you're more than welcome to. This is a MariaDB failover server, so basically running Ubuntu 16, so slightly out of date. But let's say you want your database to be under failover, under clustering, you can use these tools to go ahead and do that. Replace Maria with whichever service you want to fail over, and then you basically have it there. Similar tools exist with various flavors of Linux too, so if you want to go more Red Hat based, you obviously need Red Hat based tools, but again, nothing's stopping you from clustering in the Linux world. All right. So I've kind of mentioned this before, and I absolutely love this picture because I remember the days when hard drives were super expensive for kilobytes worth of space. But in Google Cloud, you can actually create a persistent hard drive. So some of you have looked into this. I'm guessing not everybody has, but you can actually create like buckets, or you can create hard drive entities in Google Cloud if you want to go that route. As we'll look at in a little bit here too. You can also do shared drives, which work just as well. But in GCP, it is very easy to do this failover notion. The school server, it's probably possible, but it's a little bit more tricky. I have a few links here as well for a demo. I'm not going to make you watch it because it's basically somebody just kind of clicking through, basically it'd be like me, you guys watching YouTube. There's also a walkthrough with an older version of Windows Server 2008, how to do it in 2016. I don't have a link for 2019, but that GCP link is basically what we'd be looking at here. All right, any questions so far? Are we all on the same page? Not good, I'm out of coffee and it's only an hour into it. All right, so now we're going to talk about sharing very briefly, and then we're going to look at this GCP demo a little bit, and then you guys are going to have some in-class remote work. So one of the things that you are going to want to do is to be able to share your PCs. So you should be able to log into your teammates' machines if you're on the Active Directory network. So you did the in-class lab, you joined my domain. We have this notion of a trust relationship that exists. Obviously, I didn't go through and grade those yet, but if you did that in-class lab, you should be able to access your teammates' PCs, which is fairly handy for, especially now, you can all remotely administrate each other's machines. So we have this link through the domain, and now I'm talking about the CTO network. One thing I should specify too, if you want to share your Google Cloud VMs, there is a link out there for basically creating a VPC network, which is going to put you all in the same subnet between projects. You're going to have to do that if you want to have like an Active Directory infrastructure. Otherwise, you're going to be on separate networks, and it's going to be a little bit messier. Still feasible, but a lot messier. My understanding is that the VPC demo is actually pretty straightforward, I think. But anyway, if we want to share machines between each other, so you've done the first step. You've joined the domain. So 3670, I think it's actually .local, not .edu, right? I know it is .edu. Anyway, one of the things you have to do is to allow remote desktop, add the firewall rule for remote desktop, and then add your server to that list. So for instance here, I've got a screenshot where if you are on your virtual machine and you want your teammates to remote into yours, you have to enable your remote desktop here. So I've got this little link. So you click local server, remote desktop is disabled, you would enable it, and then you can remote in. You all had to do this for your machines anyway, so this should be open. So then you also have to enable remote management. So I haven't run into this year yet. If you run into problems with managing machines from the server manager, and what I mean by that is, let me actually get out of this machine. go into another machine. Actually go into my domain controller here. This guy up and running. My auto-generated passwords since I didn't change them yet. Getting that error a lot with RDP, I'm not sure why. Oh, there's a Bob Ross emote, which is officially the best. I shouldn't be surprised that there's a Bob Ross emote. Or is that some... That's Bob Ross. We'll call it Bob Ross. Okay. It's kind of a... Thank you. Kind of a good example too. So if you got that error where Chrome RDP doesn't let you connect because of the certificate problem, click Options, Certificates, and delete all. So certificate's really weird just now. Bob Ross is a partnered streamer. Is that his? Is that somebody just broadcasting his show? Are they still doing that? Because that was incredible when they would just Twitch stream the joy of painting. So get this up and running here. Yeah, so basically these are firewall rules to allow the WMI interface all the time. Awesome. Basically these guys, these PowerShell commands here that you would run would allow that remote administration. Like I said, I haven't run into it with 2019. I know with 2012 and 2016 this was a problem. So if you run into issues, you got to do that. All right. So right now, so this is my domain controller. Not sure if the cluster manager, yeah. So I didn't actually add the other server to this. So we'll see if this works or not. So dashboard, add other servers to manage. I want to manage my other machines in my domain, so add servers. And then you should honestly be able to search for your teammate server. So if you know what their name is, or you can search by IP address. So let's see, WSFC. Again, this is for my Google Cloud setup. You would search for your teammates' names, for instance. So, you won't see any of these on your machines. Let's add this one, see if it works. Access denied. So this is the error. This is the error that you would see, access is denied, because I don't have remote administration allowed. Let's go ahead and do that really quickly because it's kind of good to see this working. The cough is from talking for an hour straight without taking a break. Allow me to hydrate. There we go. That's what happens when you have a horrible nasally Midwestern accent. Your throat gets dry very quickly. Okie dokie. So, back to our thing here. Alright, so I haven't done any of this configuration on these machines. Remote management should be enabled. Remote desktop should be enabled here. So let's go ahead and run the other commands to allow it, because access shouldn't be denied. Let's run you. Paste. There we go. For rules have been updated. Let's run this one. So basically we're just, again, running some firewall rules for remote management. Hopefully we don't have to log out and log back in. That. Okay, so you might see this access denied error in terms of an error message. I can still remotely manage it. So if I want to go ahead and do that. So like this is using the local computer management tool. I can actually set, come on, refresh. Or maybe I don't have access. I must have to reload it or something. Let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to reboot this one and see how that goes. That should be all you need. I've done this on the local network. It works fine. So I must have not done something. Okay, so we've talked about failover. We looked at it a little bit. So here is the link I've been kind of pointing towards. If you want to do failover clustering, Google has a guide for doing that on their network. And while the server reboots, I'll kind of run through this a little bit. Thing to keep in mind if you're going to follow any of these Google Cloud guides, they tend to get out of date very quickly. Some of the code labs are out of date that are up there for like load balancing. This one is at least fairly recent, so it's pretty good. But what it's going to walk you through is creating a cluster-based load balancer. And it actually goes into great detail about what you do. A couple of things that I will mention if you want to go through this. So again, you will have 3 Windows VMs up and running, consuming resources, so make sure you turn them off when you're done. You're going to use the Google Cloud Shell. So basically you go into your compute engine, and then you'd be using, I think I lost my connection to this too. I know my computer is just freezing. Neato. Come on, Shell. Pop up. Failover I don't think was a requirement. The single sign-on was a requirement. Failover was an option. Let me make sure that I'm not saying this incorrectly for you. So the service is required. Single sign-on was required. Failover was extra credit. Yeah. I pulled open the requirements. I wanted to make sure I wasn't telling you the wrong thing. I do this slightly differently every year, so. But the if you're going to go through and do all like the G-Cloud commands, they are in this Cloud Shell here. So this is not like an SSH to your Linux machine. It is in this Cloud Shell. You might have to set your project too as well. But the other thing that I will mention, so with these commands, let me just have it. None of them had it. All right, so this one here. I'm gonna copy this and paste it into the shell. Connection was lost. Oh, reconnect. My bad. This takes a minute. So if you get a shell that looks like this, you don't see that little yellow project ID. So I'm going to try to run this command, for instance. It's going to fail because I don't have my project ID set. They actually give you the command. So your project ID is basically your project name up top. So if you click the down arrow, you can see the actual ID. So for instance, mine, they're all lowercase too, I should mention. So I can just run gcloud config set project, and then it's Frederick's add sysadmin. Yours would be whatever your project ID is. And then it knows to use this project. But, this is what I wanted to run. This is going to be one of the little gotchas if you decide to try and do this. The region, it seems to be a little bit messed up with some of their commands. So what I've been doing is I've just been deleting the region flag and running it as is. And I already have this, so it's probably going to, well, actually I'm going to cancel it out, because I already have this network set up. But you have this, did you mean region US Central 1? So it's going to ask you what region you want to use. Just click yes or type Y and let it go. Cancel. If you do the -- region and like US-Central 1 or US East or whatever you want to use, it's actually going to keep giving you errors for some reason. Yes. What's your question? Will we have a SSO lab? I don't think so. I'm just kind of looking through my labs that I've got prepped here. I don't believe we're going to have an SSO lab. Yeah, because we're going to do IAS next, and then we'll look at performance. So no, we're not ready to go through SSO. Like I mentioned though before, there are multiple options for doing SSO for your term project. So look and see at what your term project is that you're doing, and then figure out which technology is going to work for you. Because like one of the very trivial ones you can do is you can hook Active Directory into WordPress, for instance, or LDAP into WordPress. Whatever, depends on what server you're running. It depends on numerous things. And if you're lost, again, just let me know. Contact me. We'll figure it out. I'd much rather you all succeed than leave a chunk off. So the way this failover setup works, you're going to create a little network for yourself. Basically, you're going to create your own subnet. You're going to set some firewall rules. This is all being done in the Cloud Shell. You don't necessarily have to go to like VPC network and then click. These are just terminal commands. There are then gcloud commands for creating these instances. Again, like commands like this zone, I've just been leaving off, and it automatically will ask me what I want. So you're going to create these instances. One thing I will mention too is since you already have existing virtual machines, to make sure that you don't have a conflict with an IP address. So like the example has you using 10.0.0.4 and 5 and 6. I already had some of those from some of our demos. Like here's my micro instances. Oh, they're in the 10.128 network. Wouldn't have been a problem anyway. Just make sure that your internal IP addresses don't conflict with what you already have. I forgot for some reason I thought these were on a different subnet. They're in 10.128. Not a problem. Cool. So you create the instances. You set up the VMs. It has you remoting into all three of them, setting in a static IP address for all of them. So again, here you're not using DHCP. It's a static IP. And then basically just walks you through Active Directory, your domain account. Like I said, this is a fairly extensive and long demo, but if you want to do failover, it is very easily attainable, at least for Windows. So one of the things that I want to show though here, why all my connections died. Go ahead and get back into my domain controller. Broken demo day. At least I haven't had too many problems with the demos so far. I'm guessing part of it's just oh, now Chrome died. May I go to the bathroom? If you must, take the hall pass. So this is the second time that Chrome has died on me today trying to use RDP, so I'm not sure what's going on. Yes, wash your hands for 20 seconds minimum. And then don't touch your keyboard. Make sure that you sanitize your keyboard when you come back. I will say this, I went out to, well, this is up and running. I went out to Kroger yesterday, and it was like a scene out of Mad Max. It was bizarre. The only meat that was there was better than meat sausages, which was suspicious, and corned beef. So why are we mirroring now? We're not mirroring. Okay. All right, so back on my domain controller here. Ooh, shorted its motherboard. Yeah, you got some liquid in there, huh? Anyway, so I'm here on my domain controller. This is basically the last thing that I'm going to talk about before we end. So I set up a file share witness, and again, this is inside the guide. Yeah, it was really weird, and people were doing that hoarding thing and filling up their carts with everything. It's very bizarre times. But basically what I did is I set up c/share/cluster witness test cluster. Um, I went into its properties and sharing, and advanced sharing, and I created, basically I shared this folder with my test cluster. So you can actually share pretty much anything with your actual server cluster. So I entered this test cluster $sign to tell Windows that, this is what my file share witness is going to be. And then inside here we actually will see, witness file, various things. Um, I'll answer the real question here. So sharing through Windows and Linux users. So if you're doing the Linux users, you need to set it up slightly differently. So you can share with Linux, but you're going to have to take some extra steps. So either using Samba or setting up some kind of an LDAP integration or something like that. All right, so basically what this ends up with, and again, I stopped about halfway through because there's already 2 hours into setting up this demo. You can have host take over. If you keep going, it becomes a load balancer. Fishing for a question for the lab. Is that in the lab? It was on the midterm. We should be done with that question. All right, so we'll go back to the presentation. Type intensifies as Google loads. Yeah, cough is definitely from dry throat. Okay, so anybody have any questions on the material at all? Colossa height. So this was going to be basically a iteration of your last in-class assignment where you all worked together, started implementing your website with what your design from last week was. But instead, since we're all at home, what I'm looking for is for you all to figure out who's going to be in charge and lead the demo for the term project. So who's in charge? What technology are they going to use? And how can your other teammates contribute to this? So I know I can guarantee that you all know more than me about streaming, right? I know old man stuff like using WebEx or Zoom or stuff like that to share. But if you all want to figure out a way for your team to present your project, whether it's one person or all contribute, up to you. I just want to know what your initial thoughts are. And with that, how is progress going? Where are you at with your term projects? What are you struggling with? What do you need feedback on? And then if you guys have time, maybe consider implementing your website while you're all at home, isolating from each other. But basically, I want to make sure that you're all still moving forward, even with all this uncertainty going on. Oh no. Oh no. watching my stream at all. There's a great meme or emote. Not watching my stream at all. Yeah. It was inevitable. Thank you. That made my day. All right. So for okay. So one other thing too is that I created all of these Discord channels for each of your project teams. Feel free to use those as a place to discuss, since you obviously can't meet in person or shouldn't meet in person, but definitely consider using that. Yeah, there you go. Love it. If any of your teams want a voice channel, let me know and I'll create them. Otherwise, I assume you're probably more going to want to either chat in there, or chat on a separate location. Basically, I just want to make sure that you all have a way to work together without actually meeting in person. So whatever you need, email me, message me, let me know, and I will get it set up for you. Other than that, any questions or anything that you guys want to talk about before I let you go? All right. I'll let that one hang in the air for a moment before ending. So, thumbs up. Yeah, so you guys have until Thursday night with that SynClass assignment. And if you need more time, let me know for that. I mean, it's just a couple of questions where you just fill it in and upload it as normal. But other than that, I will see you all on Thursday. And again, any suggestions, anything that would make this better for you all, just drop me an email or a message and I will do my best to help out. Anyway, thanks for a fun stream. And this clip, which is, yeah, it's a thing. Well done. Bye, everybody.